my lovelies, welcome back to the Geek Suite. I'm your host, the one and only Kidner Bean, and we're back on my couch today because I don't have energy to set up my normal studio space. So, we're here, we're comfy, and let's get into it. But before we do, as always my lovelies, please give this video a thumbs up and be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our delicious Geek Suite content. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, we can get into the topic of today's video. Why do the monsters from Monsters, Inc. think that children are toxic?
A single touch could kill you!
The answer to that we'll go over in today's video. Alrighty, lovelies, let's get into it. So, when we were first introduced to the monsters of Monsters, Inc., we see that their world is more or less a parallel to ours. They have cars, live in apartment buildings, and, as we were in early 2000s, having a power crisis. The key difference between our world and the monster world is that their world is powered by Scream in order to create their electricity. And the way that they generate this power through Scream is through another key difference between their world and ours, which is that they have somehow mastered the Rick and Morty multiverse portal where that they can open the doors to children's closets and go from their world to ours. Now, I did think when I first watched the movie that this little snippet of "don't touch children, a single touch could kill you" was an incredibly ingenious way to work in how the monsters only scare children but wouldn't actually cause them any harm, to sort of give this real world spin on it where children are afraid of monsters but they never see them, they're never touched by them. I thought that was very clever on the part of the animators, but it then begged the question, where did the monsters get this idea? Because this wasn't something that they just inherently knew the first time that they manifested this technology and opened the door to the human world. It had to be something that they learned. We then see, through Mike and Sully's adventures, that they learn that children are not in fact toxic, but...
Hey Mike, this might sound crazy, but I don't think that kid's dangerous.
Really? Well, in that case, let's keep it. I always wanted a pet that could kill me!
No.
But there's still something that happened in Monster World history that led them to this belief. And that's what we're going to cover in today's video. Now, if we're operating under the assumption that the Monster World parallels our own, with the exceptions of where they source their electricity or their power from, and that they have this portal door technology, let's sort of keep a timeline for about when these advancements would have happened. So let's assume that they acquire the door technology before they acquire the power technology. And let's operate under the assumption that once they have whatever previous source of power that they had, like for instance, before electricity, people used gas-oiled lamps and we had coal and steam to operate machinery in the time. Let's assume that they were also using the Monster World equivalent of coal or steam to generate the power to operate these portal doors, and that they saw electricity and found a way to generate power from these initial contacts with the human world. So the human world gained electricity around the end of the 19th century and into the early 20th. So this would be about the time that monsters first started using these portal doors in the way that we see them in Monsters, Inc. to generate electricity. That does not mean that monsters didn't exist in the human world or have previous contact, because of course if you look into human lore, the concept of monsters goes back as far back as human oral tradition does. But for the purposes of this video and operating in the world of Monsters, Inc. and the human world that coincides with it, let's go ahead and say that primary monster-human contact in the way that we see it in the film, with monsters going into children's homes and scaring them to generate electricity, is going to be where monsters learned that humans are toxic. So then, we have children being frightened by monsters in their bedrooms from these monsters using portal door technology at the end of the 19th or beginning of the early 20th century. Now, this is a key point to why monsters think children are toxic, because at the end of the 19th and beginning of the early 20th century, humanity was ravaged by infectious diseases. And I figured this video was pertinent to make in the current coronavirus scare, because it is these diseases that jump species that are going to make them think that children are toxic. Because The coronavirus, like many viruses that have come in pandemic scares over the years, swine flu, avian flu, H1N1, etc., these are all diseases that jump from animal species to human. And so then it would be not a large leap to think that the common infectious diseases that affected children primarily in the early 20th century would be things like diphtheria, pneumonia, tuberculosis, measles, mumps, and yellow fever. All of these are incredibly contagious and were, at the time, incredibly deadly if untreated. So, it wouldn't be a surprise to think that the first monsters who went into the human world were in contact with these children and may have touched them or something that they belonged to, because, as we see in the movies, it doesn't even have to be contact with the actual human child, but it could simply be something that they own, such as an article of clothing. We see in this clip here where poor Marty gets repeatedly attacked by the CDA and desanitized and, hazmated down by being touched by something as simple as a sock. So it's very clear that these were diseases that were highly infectious in the human world, that when they made contact with monsters coming in through these portals, that these monsters then got sick, and at least one of them had to have died in order for this "a single touch could kill you" hysteria to have taken over the monster world. Now, of course, Boo isn't toxic, and this myth could be easily dispelled in the modern world, or at least when Monsters, Inc. came out in the early 2000s, because of the massive advances in modern medicine in the human world. We had vaccines, we had running water, which is a big thing. A lot of reason people die today of things like the flu is because they're in places where they don't have access to running water, to clean running water. Let me rephrase that. Clean running water. Looking at you, Flint. So nowadays, when children do get sick, it's typically not with these incredibly deadly infectious diseases that could then pose a threat to the monster world. And also, with 100 years of going back and forth between the human world and the monster world, monsters have probably built up an immunity to the common infectious diseases that humans carry. They may have been more deadly at the beginning during first contact because their immune systems hadn't been exposed to human flu or human yellow fever or diphtheria or measles or tuberculosis, aka consumption. Why don't we call diseases fun things like that anymore? Consumption. Sounds so much more fun than tuberculosis. What a mouthful. I mean, really, people. And so there you have it, my lovelies. The reason that monsters in Monsters, Inc. and Monsters University think that children are deadly infectious is because when they first had contact with children in the human world at the end of the 19th or beginning of the 20th century, they were incredibly infectious with deadly diseases. Which reminds me, my lovelies, we are currently experiencing a spread of coronavirus, and so you should always be careful to wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, keep yourselves clean, keep yourselves healthy, keep yourselves safe, but also keep in mind that we've been through coronavirus before, the early 90s. We lived as a society. We've been through avian flu and swine flu and the rhino flu and virus and H1N1, and we will get through this together. And more importantly, you should also wash your hands when there's not an infectious disease outbreak. Hand washing is important, people. Don't be gross. My lovelies aren't gross. I know you. Alrighty. That's all the time I have for today, my lovelies. We are still running our Geek Suite giveaway, which I will link a video to here, so that way you can see my lovely prize of the Dungeons & Dragons vs. Rick and Morty box set, and instructions on how to enter the contest in that video. So be sure to click on that link, be sure to enter the contest. We will be announcing the winner at the end of March. Thank you so much for watching, my lovely. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. And if you have a little extra dough, be sure to join our Patreon family. Patrons are who make this channel possible. Each donation, by month or by video, helps create content like this, and it gives my lovelies extra access to Patreon-only material, such as early access to videos, Patreon-only content, uncensored versions of videos, and the opportunity to vote in polls that determine the content of upcoming videos. And a reminder My Patreons who vote in these polls get double the votes as opposed to my Twitter followers. For more information, be sure to click the link down in the description section below. Once again, my lovelies, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.